Hello and welcome to the second episode of the Birdcast. This is Hawkeye 1621.
I am Phoenix 13.
And we are going to walk you through the timeline of Star Trek.
Yes, continuing off on our Star Trek theme for the Birdcast here. I believe last time we touched up on the movies, the original series. And as we also stated towards the end of that episode, that the Next Generation movies didn't really matter.
Well, the one of them really did matter.
Okay, well,
one
First Contact and Nemesis. Other than that, well, Nemesis really didn't affect too much. But First Contact was
First Contact. So we're going to start off. There are a bunch of episodes in the original, in Voyager, the original series, all of the series, that go back into the 2000s and the 21st century, the 19th century, the 20th century, all of them.
And Next Gen even goes all the way back to before humankind was a thing.
Yeah, there was...
Actually, it was before life itself was a thing.
No, was it Next Gen or was it Voyager?
It was Next Gen. That was the one. It was the one where Q took
Death Wish. It was Voyager. Voyager went back to where the universe was created.
Oh yeah, they went all the way back. I was referring to the one in Next Gen where they go to where Q shows Picard
3.5. Yeah, 3.5 billion years into the past.
Yeah, where life on Earth begins, and it's because Picard does this thing that creates an anti-time nebula that prevents.
But anyways,
but we are going to be starting
with World War III. So not much is written about World War III due to the fact that it was so drastic and so destructive. There's not many records left for World War III.
There's like 600 million as casualties in the war or something like that.
Yeah,
I believe they said that in First Contact.
Most of the population of the world is gone.
Most governments are gone. There's like 600 million dead, and most governments are completely gone.
So, World War III, drastic. It was basically one of the darkest points in Earth history.
It kind of kicked off another dark age, really.
Yeah, and it was like that. World War III started its build-up in 2026 and to 2048, and then 2049 is when World War III actually hit. This is all that we know.
And the war ended in 53. 2053, which you got from, I believe it was in First Contact as well.
Yeah, I believe First Contact said. 2054 to 2079 was our post-atomic horror, which is basically the fallout of the entire war. So, everybody's
because he said fallout, he does not mean the stupid game.
Yeah, it's everybody's trying to scavenge and trying to survive and everything. But in 2063,
April 4th, April 12th. It was one of those days. It was April 11th, wasn't it?
I think so. It was.
That was when.
So let's start.
We got to jump to the future
where
first.
It actually. Yes.
We got to go to the future.
So
now.
Back in the 23rd century, the Enterprise. It's been 6 years since Picard had been captured by the Borg the first time, or no, since he'd been captured by the Borg.
Yep.
And the Borg were going to attempt to conquer the Federation again, but because Picard had been captured by the Borg, they said, no, we want you to stay and guard the Romulan border in case somebody attacks.
Which is a BS rule. They're just keeping him away.
They didn't know how he would react to everything. They didn't know what would happen. But when the Borg attack, when the cube gets there, Picard had already tied into the ship's speakers the command relays for all of the communications for all of the ships, the fleet that was there.
And it took about 30 seconds for everything to go horribly.
From bad to worse.
So they said, "Screw it, we're going to Earth anyway." They got there.
They get there, everything's falling apart. Over half of the fleet has already been destroyed, including the admiral's ship, the one that was in charge of the fleet. So Picard, being the senior most there with the flagship, no less, said, "I'm taking over the fleet. I want you all to hit here." And they blow up the cube. But before the cube blows up, it launches a sphere. The sphere causes a temporal wake and goes back in time. Enterprise gets caught in the temporal wake, and as they're kind of hanging there, they see the Earth change. It gets assimilated in the past.
There's like
so
8
they go
million
through
Borg or something like that on Earth.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
They get to the past,
so
which is like the day they find out it's like the day before first contact, after they've taken out the sphere. Sorry.
The sphere launches three or four plasma torpedoes.
Quite a few, actually.
It was just when they got there, it was just launching one after another.
One after the other at the surface, because they were trying to hit a missile complex in Montana, which was where Zefram Cochrane was going to launch the Phoenix, which was the first Earth warp ship, the next morning.
See, Montana is so bad. Not even the Borg want it.
No one wants to be in Montana. Not even the Borg.
So the Enterprise blows it up. They meet Zefram Cochrane, who created warp. He discovered warp, and was basically the reason that Star Trek became to be.
And so when he makes first contact, was the reason they also aided was because he had to make it at a certain time, because a Vulcan science ship was surveying the system, and they needed to get it off before they left the system so that they could detect that someone had broken the warp barrier.
Yes.
And so the Vulcans show up.
The whole thing. The Vulcans show up. They do the gesture, the greeting, and that's basically.
And Zefram Cochrane pulls out a gun and shoots him. No, I'm just kidding.
No, that's the Terran timeline. We discover in Enterprise that the Terran timeline, Zefram Cochrane meets the Vulcans, and then when the Vulcan is in good greetings and friendly gestures,
he whips out a shotgun and puts a round right in his chest.
Yeah, he just kills the Vulcan, and then takes his ship and just starts...
Actually, side note, you know why I find that so funny is in Star Trek Online, on the Mirror Incursion event, remember that one?
Yeah.
Did you see that one of the guns, like one of the special things you get was Zefram Cochrane's shotgun?
Yep.
I thought that was really funny.
I've wanted that since I saw it.
Is it like one of those things where it's going to be like a species-specific weapon where it's like 100% extra damage if you use it on a Vulcan?
That would actually be very cruel and awesome.
That would be hilarious. But anyway, back to what actually happens. After the Vulcans are there, they begin aiding Earth in construction of their own ships, essentially.
Yeah. It takes 100 years before Earth actually goes doing deep explorations.
Actually, the coolest part is the Phoenix, I believe's max speed was probably warp 1.1, 1.2. But in order to get to an actual exploration vessel, which would be like the NX-01, those kind of class ships, they had this cool little shuttle that they built. That it kind of was. I can never remember the model number. It's called like the X. It had an X in it. It was a space shuttle, kind of like an arrowhead. And it resembled that. And that one was the first actual made Earth ship that was developed by a company, as opposed to Zefram Cochrane, who built the Phoenix, which was just built by him.
Yes. Out of the remains of a missile.
Yeah, he used
the remains of a nuclear missile.
Yeah. And so when that one could, I think, hit like warp 2, warp 3, somewhere in there. Mm-hmm. And then it took them like 25 years before they ever launched the NX-01 because they were developing the warp 4 warp core, which was going to be used for their deeper exploration vessels. And the NX-01, I believe's maiden voyage was in 2151.
Yes. That's
And
when they
the
discovered the
only
Klingon.
reason they were able to leave was because there was a Klingon on Earth, and they were taking him back to Kronos. So Earth said, up yours to the Vulcans, and took the ship.
Yep. With T'Pol, that was the only reason the Vulcans would actually let them go, was if T'Pol, one of their... was
A Vulcan had to be on board, yes.
And so she was the first officer.
And I believe Jonathan Archer is the name of the captain. I'm making sure it's the right one. But his entire family, like his grandfather worked on the warp core for the first one. His father worked on the warp core for the warp core for the NX-01. And then Jonathan Archer was...
His grandfather piloted.
Yeah, he piloted. He
didn't
piloted. He worked on and piloted the first ship I talked about, the one that looks like a space shuttle. And you got that in an episode of Enterprise too, but I don't remember which one.
Yeah.
I think it was in season 2.
So the whole thing with Enterprise, they go through the Xindi Wars, the Temporal Cold War.
Yeah, they touch on it a little bit, yeah.
Which Star Trek Online, if you play, does a fantastic job hitting on the Temporal Cold War.
Yeah, they did a great job.
Their Agents of Yesterday season is phenomenal, and then Artifacts is pretty cool.
Yeah, but the other thing they do is they meet the Andorians. They meet a lot of the races that become kind of the major contributors to the Federation later.
Yeah,
I believe it was season 2 or
they meet the Andorians because the Andorians were attacking what was thought to be this peaceful monastery of Vulcans. What system was that? Do you remember?
I can picture it in my head, but I can't remember it.
It's even on the STO map. It's like right there in between Vulcan and Andor.
Yeah, I know, I can picture it, but I cannot remember it.
But it turned out it was a spy station. It was a listening post directed at Andor.
And I want to say it was season 2 or season 3 of Enterprise was when the first photon torpedoes came off the line.
Yeah.
The Mark 1 photon torpedoes.
Because all they were using were pulse phase cannons.
Well, they actually had torpedoes, but they were like glorified missiles.
Yeah, they were basically warheads.
Yeah, they were like C4 strapped into the end of a rocket, essentially.
Mm-hmm. They really weren't all that fantastic. Yeah. But so the voyage of the whole thing with Enterprise lasted for 4 years.
Well, we don't know. We don't know how long Enterprise lasted, like the NX-01, because the show kind of got cut short, and so the whole thing kind of ended with like 4 years in.
No, the Enterprise, the last mission of the Enterprise was in 2161.
Oh yeah, well that was when they were taking Archer to go to the foundation of the Federation.
Yeah,
but they did stuff with the ship before that.
Yeah, they didn't. Well, okay, so let's go. Let's do this. Okay, so when Enterprise ends, for the primary part of it ends in 2155, and 2156 to 2150 or 2160. The Earth-Romulan War happens.
Not a lot is known about that, but they do touch on it a little bit in the original series.
They touch on it a couple of times. Because if you actually go back and watch the original series,
I believe it was
they straight up say...
was the episode.
Yes, Balance of Terror. They straight up say, nobody's ever seen a Romulan before. Because they just invaded. They just invaded Earth and were trying to take out humans for really and truly no particular reason, was there? Was there any explanation as to why they attacked?
I'm going to give the same explanation I'm going to give for everything. Because the Tal Shiar said so.
Probably. Don't we love the Tal Shiar?
Tal Shiar suck. We'll touch them later. And you'll know why.
But so the Earth-Romulan War happened for 4 years. Everything with Star Trek is 4 years. You ever notice
Yeah, the
that?
4-year war with the Klingons, 4-year war with the Romulans. Well, except for the Klingon Romulan war was like 2 months.
Yeah, it was ridiculously short because the Klingons couldn't hit the Romulans couldn't hit the Klingons.
We'll get to that in a minute. We're almost there.
But so yeah,
Earth-Romulan War
was
really
4 years.
I think that one ended because the Earth kind of got aid, like from the Andorians, the Vulcans, people like that. Because at the end of the Romulan War, like the very next year, was the signing and the foundation of the Federation.
Mm-hmm. The way that we find this one out is Riker goes before. This is back on the Enterprise D, not on E. This is back before he's supposed to go and take command of the Titan. He kind of wants to make a personal decision, so he goes to the holodeck and watches a simulation.
Hang on, if it was before he was supposed to take the Titan, shouldn't he have been on the Enterprise E?
Good point. Yeah.
See,
I don't remember why.
That was the thing. It was like he was on the. He was like on the command deck of the Enterprise D, even though he's supposed to be on the Enterprise E, and he's looking back at the original Enterprise. That whole thing was screwy.
Well, no, I don't remember what exactly the reason was that he went back and to. It was just a decision that he had to make. That's all I know. But he goes and he watches the final mission
Of the NX-01 Enterprise.
Yeah, because he watches as the Federation is born. He watches Archer in the last day as the Federation is being formed.
Then mostly it's mostly peaceful for a while, and I mean
2164. The only time we ever hear anything about this is actually in Star Trek Beyond.
This is just because I know the timeline split.
Yeah, I know some of you instantly go, "Oh, that's the Kelvin timeline." Well, no, because this one took place in 2164.
The Kelvin timeline split was 2233.
Yeah, that's when the Kelvin got attacked.
A couple months before the start of the 4 Years' War with the Klingons.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that's why the Kelvin timeline is such a big difference.
That's why, it's such a huge difference right there. Is because Axanar, the war with Axanar was huge, and
it never happened.
Yeah.
In the Kelvin timeline.
In fact, it was actually they were leading up. The war with Axanar was essentially what Into Darkness was about. They were about to start the war with Klingons, but then they didn't.
It just got averted. So in 2164, the USS Franklin goes missing. Nothing really major there. It's just it's really for the Star Trek Beyond.
Yeah. And then from 2161 essentially to 2233, which is the Kelvin timeline split. Like I said, the Federation is just in a state of growth, exploration, things like that. Nothing major of consequence happens until in 2233 they piss off the Klingons.
The Klingons get fed up with them. So the Klingon War begins. Again, not too much is known, except for Axanar, which, if CBS would ever let it go...
Hashtag we stand with Axanar.
Hashtag we stand with Axanar.
According to that... I don't know, would you call that canon yet, or...
I call it canon.
All right, according to the Axanar canon, the first, basically, year of the war, the Federation just gets their butts kicked. Flat out.
Yes.
In fact, the Klingons were using a tactic, which was essentially the strategy of least respect, was what it translated to.
Yeah.
Because they did not respect the Federation as an empire at all. And
nope.
The Federation gets a new fleet admiral to actually take command, and they begin building warships. The first warship the Federation builds is called the USS Ares.
Yes. And it was funny.
Kind of looks like a weird version of a Centaur mixed with an Akira.
No, mixed with a uh, oh God, I can't believe I forgot the name of it. Excelsior.
It doesn't have anything at all
It's
that looks like an Excelsior, except for maybe the
the
saucer.
hull. The hull looks like part of an Excelsior.
It has no hull. Remember, the Ares is like a
The Ares.
saucer with a little torpedo section and then nacelles. It has no.
No, dude, that's not the Ares at all.
I remember exactly what the Ares looks like.
Dude, look up a picture of the Ares.
I
It
am
has
looking
a
at
hull.
one right now. It does have a hull. The only thing that it has that resembles the Excelsior is the fact that it is the only other Starfleet ship to have straight pylons going to the
I don't know.
nacelles.
It's a very interesting and pretty ship.
It looks more like a Centaur than anything else.
The
But
uh
it was the
the
first warship made by the
yeah,
Federation.
the rest of them were more exploration. They could defend themselves, but they couldn't really go into war.
And
Uh
the whole thing with Axanar at that point, it kind of turned into an arms race between the Federation and the Klingons. The Klingons were building the D7, which is known as the Katinga, which is still used even into DS9, like out and even out that far. Like the D7 was,
Cause it's amazing.
yeah, the D7 was the main Klingon cruiser for a very long time.
The
And the
D7 is amazing.
And the Federation began construction on the Constitution. And the whole thing became an arms race.
It was 2240. It was in 2245. That's when the Katingas were launched, and then within a month, the Enterprise and the Constitution were launched.
Yeah.
The
They
NCC
actually were launched.
1700.
They were launched,
And
I believe, at the Battle of Axanar.
yeah, they were launched right as the Klingons were coming. They didn't even get a shakedown. They just had to go.
They
straight
literally
into battle.
came out of the shipyard into the fight.
Yeah, while the rest of the fleet was holding off.
And
Which
the Constitution is so much more superior than the Katingas that I believe only 13 Constitutions
Yes.
were made. The
Only 13
D7 was
Constitutions.
mass produced by the Klingons. The Federation only had 13 Constitutions. And those 13 Constitutions alone were enough to keep the Klingons out of Federation space.
Yes,
Pretty much indefinitely.
that pretty much ended the Klingon War.
Well, I mean,
Not
the
to-
Federation eventually took back most of the territory they'd lost, and eventually that's when the neutral zone was set up. Because the Klingons
Yes.
could no longer stop the Federation Constitution classes. They were just too outgunned. So behind the line, they created a giant wall of turrets, sensor turrets, and star bases, which the Federation went, okay, we'll stop there. And they put down a whole line of star bases there as well, and that became the Klingon neutral zone.
Yes. So
And that's how the war
9 years, 9 years later, after everything happens, there's nothing. That now we're getting into the original series.
In fact,
This is
yeah.
2254, and it's the Cage. For those of you that know, that is the original pilot for the original series. This is Christopher Pike, not Captain Kirk. They get a distress call from a planet called Talos 4, and so Pike takes the Enterprise to go investigate, and they get captured. The Talosians, was that what they were called?
I
Do you remember?
don't remember.
I want to say they're Talosians.
They just look like your typical Martians.
Like, yeah, they look like a mixture between a Martian and what somebody thinks that a psychic should look like.
A big
with
old
a pulsing
giant brain pulsing thing.
Yeah.
They look like the Martians from like when Mars Attacks or whatever that crappy B movie was.
No, they look like Mastermind, but white.
You mean Megamind?
No. I'm talking Mastermind from Hulk, the villain.
Oh, yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's what they look like. They look like him, but white and a little shorter.
But yeah, I believe the Enterprise actually has two captains before Kirk. I don't remember the name of the other one. It was
I
Pike and
don't
somebody
either.
else.
Yes, there was somebody else. He only had the ship for like 5 years. Pike only had
Yeah,
it for like 4
he had it for the
years.
end of the war. Like he was
Yeah.
basically had it until the end of the war, and then Pike took it essentially.
No, yeah, that's right. Okay, so Pike had just gotten the Enterprise. He just received the
Well, no,
Enterprise.
the Cage was about a year or two in. I don't remember when Kirk got it. I don't remember the date.
Kirk gets the Enterprise in early 2265 or late 2264.
Yeah, and
Which is
which is when
the
the
first
first actual mission.
episode. Yeah,
The first episode
mission.
was. I don't remember.
The Cage. The first episode's
Well,
The
that was the
Cage.
pilot. I don't remember the actual first episode of season 1 of the original series. I don't remember what the name of it was.
Where no man has gone before.
Oh, it was? Oh, I'll shut up.
Yeah, that was the first. Everybody that watched the original series should know this one. This is the one where Lieutenant Commander Gary Mitchell, one of Kirk's best friends, is changed. He becomes this powerful being, almost like a Q, and he's a threat to the Enterprise and humanity itself. And he almost kills Kirk. He changes the woman that he loved on the Enterprise to be like him, and he's, to put it mildly, just a total ass.
Pretty much. But so that was the beginning of the first and longest mission up to that point, which is a 5-year exploration mission.
Mm-hmm.
That was
The
Enterprise.
rest of them really, the rest of it really didn't, because they were still kind of on high alert with the Klingons. They were still kind of...
Yeah, they had they had some scuffles with the Romulans. They had some scuffles with the Klingons. I like scuffle.
Scuffle.
You know why? Trouble with tribbles, and they are fluffy.
Yes! Okay, so before we get into them, 2266 to 2269 is the original series. 2269 to 2270 is the animated series, which I enjoy the animated series. I'm sorry, I love that series.
I don't think I ever saw it.
Oh, it's funny because it's corny, but it still fits. So in 2268 we have Trouble with Tribbles, and at the same time,
Well, because
Trials. Travel. Yeah, because time travel makes everything screwed up. If you've ever been
and tribulations.
if you're a Whovian fan, you know time travel's fucked up. But so Trials and Tribulations happens at the same time as Trouble with Tribbles.
And this essentially, the guy from Trouble with Tribbles goes back in time using some teardrop thing they call the tear. It's the prophet of time or whatever. I don't remember what they called it. And they take the Defiant back to the same time.
Well, okay, so let's start with Trouble with Tribbles before we do anything with DS9. So the whole thing with Trouble with Tribbles was they were kind of having a dispute with the Klingons about a planet called Sherman's Planet. It was actually going to be a really big thing. It was the next the next planet to be colonized. It had really good fertilization right there on the border. It kind of technically in the neutral zone.
Well, K7 was technically in the neutral zone.
Yeah, K7 was not really anything. It wasn't. It was.
It was a neutral space station.
Yeah, it was where everybody could go. It wasn't owned by Starfleet or the KDF.
Well, it was a Starfleet station. It was not a Starfleet run.
It wasn't a military station.
was a trade station.
Yeah. So there's a dispute going on, and Kirk gets called to K7 because he's supposed to guard the, oh god, what was it called?
It was some type of grain.
It was quadritriticale. That's what it's called, quadritriticale.
How the heck do you remember that?
Don't ask me. I could not explain. That's just all I remember. It's called quadritriticale, and it was this miracle wheat. Is essentially what it was. It was fast growing. Just it was durable. It was just it was a farmer's paradise for a wheat.
I still can't believe you remembered the name. I'm like flabbergasted. Because I remembered it was great. I'm flabbergasted you remembered that name.
But so they everything's kind of all right, but they kind of figure out that there's an issue. There was this wonderful trader called Cyrano Jones who had this wonderful creature called Tribbles. He gave a Tribble to Lieutenant Uhura. She brought the Tribble on board. It took one bite of something and gave birth to, I want to say, 10 other Tribbles.
There's an equation. They say the equation in the show for how many there were. There's like 10 million of them.
Yeah, it was ridiculous how many Tribbles were on the space station.
I forget who was the commander that shows up. The Klingon commander, was it Kor?
Yes, it was Kor.
Yeah, I thought it was Kor. Probably spelled a Q just to make things weird.
But so okay. They discover that the grain was poisoned because of the Tribbles. The Tribbles somehow got in.
They got into the grain storage.
Yeah, they got
all of it
through vents and stuff. They got into the grain storage. The reason they discovered that was because on the Enterprise there were a number of Tribbles, and they got into the food replicators, and so they were like, "There's the similar vents on the station. We might want to go check those."
So the entire storage capacity of the grain was eaten, and most of them were dead.
Yeah, I
wonder how Dr. McCoy felt saying that, Jim. It's dead.
Yeah,
it's dead.
It's dead, Jim. It's dead, Jim. You can't have a Star Trek episode without hearing "He's dead, Jim."
Or I'm a blank, not a or I'm a doctor, not a blank. Insert blank.
It's yeah, seriously. Insert job title here.
Insert occupation here.
Because Dr. McCoy. But so
I'm a doctor, not a scientist.
One other thing
it was Devil in the Dark. It was I'm a doctor, not a bricklayer.
Bricklayer. Yes. But we'll get to that. That's one of my favorite episodes. But so they one other thing that you have to know about Tribbles, they don't like Klingons.
Not at all.
So they discover that the governors, or no, what was his title? He was some high government official.
He was like the deputy or something. He was like one of the ambassadors in charge of the planet or something like that.
He was a dick, is what he was.
And it turns out he was a Klingon.
No, his assistant.
I thought you were talking about... Oh, the other guy was in charge of colonizing the planet. Yeah, he was like the governor of the planet. And his was like deputy...
No, because remember, they were still kind of... It wasn't anybody's planet yet. It was still in dispute. But he was some high government official, and he was just an ass.
And Kirk was giving him all kinds of crap.
Oh, yeah. Kirk just did not like him from the beginning.
There are Klingons swarming all over my station. I was not aware that 6 Klingons constituted a swarm.
Yeah. But, so it turns out his assistant is a Klingon because through the use of Tribbles, which screamed at him.
They don't like you.
But they like Mr. Spock, and they like you. They like you, Bones.
That was the one where they ended it because they just gave all the tribbles to the Klingons, right?
Oh God, yes. So
Scotty beams them all into their engineering.
Well, they'll be no triple tall.
Where are they?
He gave him a good home in Klingon engineering.
Yeah. You did what? Yeah, right before they went to warp, I beamed them into their engineering.
So, we'll cut into trials and tribulation.
It was the Klingon from that episode that they busted. He took the Defiant back in time by use of a prophet thing.
Oh, and to clarify, the reason being because during the time of the original series, all Klingons looked human-like because of a disease.
Oh my God, we totally forgot to mention that. That was back in under Enterprise.
But let me do Trials and Tribulations first.
Just don't let me forget, and then I'll go back to that.
We'll end it here. We'll start the next episode with that, but we gotta finish this one up. So Trials and Tribulations, the undercover Klingon goes back in time. He
puts a bomb in a tribble.
Yeah, he has a tribble that's loaded with a bomb, and so there. If you go back and watch Trouble with Tribbles,
very good editing job.
Yes, oh my God, it's amazing. But Gene Roddenberry would have been proud. But if you go back and watch Trouble with Tribbles, it's the scene where they open up the grain storage and all the tribbles are falling onto.
And then occasionally one will come dropping on his head again. It was because Dax and Cisco were throwing him out the hole.
Yeah, they were scanning them one by one, and they were going. They were just. The real reason, the true story behind it was they had stagehands that were collecting the tribbles off screen, and they were feeding them back, and so all the stagehands were just pegging them and throwing them at Kirk. It turns out the whole thing and somebody, please shut this door, was not actually in the script. That whole thing was not actually a part of the episode.
He did it so they stopped pegging him with the tribbles.
Gene thought it was golden. He just wanted it. He said it fit the episode. It was perfect. So he just kept it, and he said, "Yes, I love it. That's my scene." So thank you for the stagehands. They made such a beautiful scene. So in the lore, as Phoenix already described,
it was Jadzia, Dax, and Cisco tossing tribbles out the hole as they were scanning them,
pegging Kirk in the head every once in a while. And then they found the tribble and beamed it off the station. And
it blew up. And then they went home.
The whole time, it's funny. The whole time, the Defiant is right there with the Enterprise and Core ship, cloaked, and they're just like, they're afraid because they're like, oh my God, we're gonna get caught. This is gonna be bad.
Luckily, the Defiant could cloak. They had a Romulan cloaking device. They didn't have a crappy one.
So.
24th century Romulan cloaking device.
23rd.
24th.
No, 20.
It was 2370s, dude. That'd be the 24th century.
No. Oh, yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. For some reason, I'm thinking 24th was STO. It's 25th.
That's the 25th century.
Yeah, sorry. But, so, the way they end the episode is Cisco getting Kirk's signature, which is like everybody would have done that. Because Kirk, even long after he was dead, was still the General Lee of military tactics.
Yeah, you had to learn about Kirk.
You had to read all of Kirk's stuff in Starfleet Academy. But, so, that's all we can cover today. We're going to cut it off here, and we will see you in the next video.
probably going to discuss the nice little key bit we've forgotten the Enterprise, and we'll continue on.
So we'll start there and then we'll continue. But until then, I'm Hawkeye 1621.
I'm Phoenix 13.
And we will see you in the next episode.